See, change is fundamental. Everything changes. I mean, your body is changing in real time. The environment is changing. Tools and techniques and technology changes. I mean, need I say more about technology? It's what was state of the art yesterday is obsolete today. You know, the cliche is that in the IT industry, the product life cycle graph is like from introduction, maturity, stability, and then decline is like 90 days and less. We have seen it in all kinds of new technologies. You know, the curve is very steep, and the gaps between start and finish is declining all the time. So, change is fundamental, really. It's just that technology today has shown us how fast it is, but change has always been very fast, and it's always been a dynamic environment, always. But within change, there's also some things that are stable. So, while everything around is changing, everything changes. People change, processes change, technology changes, thoughts change, relevance changes, climate changes, your bodies change. I mean, everything changes. But through it all, there is something which is stable, which is unchanging, which is permanent, and these are what we call values and principles. So, it is like a central pillar made out of the hardest material you can imagine, call it steel or whatever, something that is a central core which can never change and which will not change, but everything around the core can change, but it is the core that holds all these mushy things around which keep changing, the central core which holds everything together. You know, it's like that Sarnath pillar, which is how many millennia old, but it's still there. Look at everything that's changed, but it's solid. These are the values and principles which give you a kind of stability through every possible vicissitude of life. It's something that gives you a solid platform which will not change. Like in yoga, if your center of gravity is low, you are unshaken, unmoved. In martial arts, there is a position called kibadachi, which is horse stance. A person who can master the horse stance cannot be moved by the most powerful punch or kick. Even if 5 people push him, he will not topple, because the power of chi is so strong and the center of gravity is low and the balance is perfect. Principles and values are like that, give you that kind of stability. So, when everybody around you is losing their heads, you will keep your wits about you and you will be calm, because you have chosen to adhere to these timeless values. So, that is all that needs to be constant. Everything else can change freely. The way you walk, the way you dress, the way you eat, everything can change. Your skill set can change, your attitudes can change, your mindset can change, your relationships can change. But through it all, if you retain this fundamental humanity which comes from understanding the essential harmony between human beings, then no change can ever touch you. And change you must. When the environment changes, you should be 2 steps ahead of it. See, a lot of people spend their lifetimes reacting to change, but that's no way to live. You are living in a reactive phase, you are reactive mode all your life. I think it's much better to see where the trajectory is, and long before the change hits you, you are ready and prepared. It's like a marksman or a sniper who's shooting a moving target will always calculate the rate of change in the speed or velocity of the target, and then he'll plug in the environmental factors like wind speed, orientation, etc., and he'll come to a calculation on how many centimeters or millimeters ahead of the target should he shoot. So, by the time the bullet gets to that point, the target reaches the bullet. So, it is not the bullet reaching the target, it is the target reaching the bullet, and that is a very powerful way of living, isn't it? You can see and then learn to anticipate, and having anticipated, you can reverse engineer and prepare yourself. So, it is preparation. So, a decision that you took today, given the circumstances, may need to be completely revisited 12 months from now, because the environment has changed. What is relevant today may be irrelevant tomorrow. You have Moore's law, which states that the amount of computing that you can compress on a silicon chip is doubling every 18 months, which is why the price of computing has crashed, because the amount of computing power you can compress into a silicon chip is doubling every 18 months. So, computing power is doubling every 18 months. I have a corollary to that, call it the Madhav Mohan corollary. Because of all that vastly increasing computing power, the stock of knowledge is doubling every 3 to 4 years. In other words, hitherto unsolvable problems, hitherto unknown facts are being discovered because of this enormous explosion in computing power. So, if you had the stock of knowledge, stocks by definition are generally static, they increase only incrementally hitherto. But now, because of the increase in computing power, stock of knowledge is also increasing exponentially. So, if the stock of knowledge is doubling every say 3 to 4 years, what was state of the art yesterday is obsolete tomorrow. Not just in technology, but in knowledge. What we thought was true yesterday is not true tomorrow. So, shouldn't we have this ability to learn, adapt and change? Go back to Charles Darwin. He talked about the fittest of the species surviving, but when Darwin talked about fittest, he wasn't meaning physical brute strength. His definition of fit was adaptation. So, species which can adapt the most are the ones who will survive. So, it is adaptation. But I have a little problem with adaptation, because adaptation, if you are not careful, becomes reactive. So, what I am suggesting is understand what adaptation is and understand the absolute imperative for adaptation, and go 100 steps beyond that, and see that while you may not need to adapt today, for sure you will need to adapt tomorrow, and therefore adapt today. So, preempt that survival adaptation by preparing for it. In other words, be ready for a problem long before it hits you. Emergency is exempted, of course. So, it is all right. You may have to revisit or change the decision that you took today. But if your decision was rooted and connected to that pillar, that unshakable pillar inside you, that is fine. You will find that the need to change will be very minimal in your decisions, because what is right rarely changes. So, you might need to change transactions, but if the principle behind the transaction is win-win, which is the right principle, then chances are that you may not need to change your decision 12 months from now, because you are looking at everybody benefiting. It's another example is, look, you are using cameras today. You decided to buy these cameras today because these are the best in the business. These are the most cost effective, productive cameras on the market. 12 months later, these cameras are obsolete. But the principle that you adhere to today was, you will use equipment that will amplify your creativity. That is the same principle you will use one year from now. Equipment that will amplify your creativity, but the cameras will be different. The principle is the same. So, that is the way we can learn to change.